Hey, audio people, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com, and I'm actually recovering from some bronchitis, so I appreciate your thoughts and prayers. Wife's got pneumonia, I've got bronchitis, and I'm hoping the girls don't get anything, so crazy sick place over at my house. Don't come to my house this week. That being said, let's look at some EQ. We talked about it on the blog earlier this week, what an EQ does, the 4 things you really need to know about EQ. And basically how an EQ is just a smarter volume fader. It's a volume fader that you can pinpoint to whatever frequency you want, which gives you so much control. And today I want to show you a little bit of subtle EQ in action. And the key word here is subtle, because even though you can go extreme with EQ, the best EQ is these subtle moves that you almost feel like they're not enough. But when applied over all your tracks in your mix, they make a big difference and they sound natural and they help everything have its place. So I figured today I'll just show you a simple example with 3 guitar tracks in a mix. Everything is relatively mixed at this point in this song, but what I did was take away any EQ on this acoustic guitar and these 2 electric guitars. They have some compression, a little bit of tape saturation that cuts in and out, but there's no EQ on them. I removed all the EQ, and I want to show you how they sound fine in the mix, but they're a little bit buried, and how with a little bit of EQ they can have a little bit more clarity and they appear a little bit better amidst all the tracks. So here we are in the song. And this is what we're listening to. So 1 acoustic up the middle, a electric guitar on the right that's kind of mimicking the acoustic with the same chords, and then a picking guitar part on the left. Okay, so they sound fine, but here's kind of what I want to show you with EQ. And when you're thinking about EQ, the way I used to think about EQ is use EQ to change the sound of a track. And that was just, a young, immature Graham thinking that that's the point of EQ. The point of EQ is to take what hopefully is a good sounding track and give it its proper space so it shines alongside everything else. So assume that you already have a good sounding track. That isn't always the case, but a little proper subtle EQ goes a long way. I'm going to do 1 track at a time, and then we'll see how these cumulative things add up into the total mix. Now I'm going to do this in solo so you can hear what I'm doing, but as I've taught for many years now, you never really want to do your EQ in solo because it's very misleading, because you can get a track sounding great in solo and then it won't work with the rest of the tracks. The point of frequencies is they have to play well with everything else. So I'm just showing you this because I know this mix, I've already done it, and it's just sort of an example. Acoustic is here. What I'm going to do is grab a 7-band EQ. This is your stock Pro Tools EQ. Every DAW has something like this. And what it's got is 5 major bands that you can boost or cut anywhere you want, and then it has a high pass and a low pass. Those are your 6th and your 7th bands. And one thing I love to do on just about everything is a high pass filter. Roll off everything, below 100 or so, and free up some headroom. Free up some space for the kick drum, bass guitar, and your track will probably sound about the same. Almost not non-noticeable at all. You roll off a little bit at low end. The other thing here is that a lot of times I find that there's some muddy frequency, so I'll maybe roll off the low end, and then with guitars and a lot of mid-range instruments, I'll go find any of that low mid stuff that's just building up, swirling around, that if I can remove it will open up the track to sound better. Let's take a listen. Remember, what we're going to do is grab a band and boost to find what we want to cut, hear it in an extreme way so we can hear what's sounding nasty, and then we can remove it. That sounds kind of honky right there. So I'm going to remove that about 3 dB. Now everything sounds extreme when boosted that much, but you're listening for frequencies that just sound nasty. So far we've cut off a lot of the low end and we've scooped out some 416 or so. Remember, we're using EQ as a volume fader. And in this case, we're trying to remove the frequencies, turn down the frequencies that are just covering up the good sound of this acoustic guitar. And it's subtle, but it's really helping. So here we are, and I'll bypass it. You hear it's a little clearer, a little more clarity. It's lower in volume, of course, because we've removed some gain. We've turned down some gain. And the one thing I like to do is, especially with guitars, is once I've removed some of the bad stuff, find maybe the sweet spot on that specific guitar that really in the mid-range makes it have its own space. And maybe I'll feature that a little bit with a little boost. Now that I've cut out stuff, I've freed up some room, so I won't actually be turning up the volume of the track. It'll be nice and balanced, but it might poke out at its best frequency. Let's see if I can go find that on this acoustic. That has that nice clarity right there. Let's dial it back to 3 dB. I like to work in 3 dB chunks because it's a noticeable chunk, but it's not too extreme, and we can always do a little bit more if we wanted to. So let's take a look at the input and the output here to make sure that I'm not turning up or turning down the signal with the EQ. So it's still a little bit quieter because I've got 2 cuts and 1 boost. So I can turn this up 0.5 dB, the output, and it maybe will level match it a little bit better. There you go. That's a little bit of subtle treatment on the acoustic guitar. Listen to it before and after. Pretty drastic when you now hear all 3 EQ moves together. We feature the best part of the acoustic, remove the unneeded parts of the acoustic, and together you get the same volume, but a much better representation of what we want the acoustic to do. Now what we're going to do is simply apply a similar concept to the electrics. Okay, I'm going to grab the same EQ, and again, these sound great, and they're different amps, so they should complement each other well, but I just want to clean them up a little bit. Let's get rid of the acoustic for now. Just listen to this one electric. That sounds pretty cool right there. It like cuts through nicely at 1.4. It's kind of mid-rangey, but it's not harsh. I really like that. So let's make that sort of the feature frequency. Let's go see if there's any low-mid stuff that we can cut out. Maybe right there. Just take out minus 3 dB there. Bypass it. And it's a little bit louder than the original input, so I'll take this down about 0.5 dB. You hear how it's a little bit thinner, a little more focused sound. You can see what we're doing here. It's cleaning it up a little bit, which again in solo is a little thin, but what matters is how it sounds in the mix. We'll get to that one second. One last guitar. This is the other guitar doing the chords. Grab a EQ for this one, and we'll see what we can do here. One thing I like to do with opposing guitars, if you have an electric in the left and electric in the right, and they're kind of holding down most of the song, is whatever sweet spot I found in one guitar, I try to cut out that a little bit in the other guitar to make it stick out even more, and vice versa. So what I mean is, over on this first guitar, electric guitar, I found that sweet spot at 1.4K. Over here, I'm just going to find 1.4K and turn it down a little bit so that it won't compete with the other guitar. That's what I'm going to cut. You see how I'm using Q? I talked about this on the blog to sort of just change the steepness, the width. It's really a width knob. How wide do you want the booster cut to be? So I just sort of narrowed that out, and I took out 1.4. But I'm going to go find what sounds good on this guitar, maybe feature that as well. Right around 2 actually sounds pretty nice. It cuts nicely. Let's bring that down to 3. Let's loosen that up a little bit. And let's see if there's any low mid stuff I can roll out here as well. And let's bypass that. Again, more focus. It's the best way I can describe it. Okay, now none of this really matters because we've been doing this in solo, and I'm just trying to show you the point. Let's take a listen to these guitars together, and then I will bypass the EQs, and then I'll bring in the rest of the mix, and we'll bypass the EQs. Pan this back the way it was. So we obviously lose some low end, which in solo you might go, man, I like that low end. But in the mix you got a bass, and that's going to fill it out. But you could hear how each guitar got a little more focused, a little more present, stuck out a little bit better when the EQ came in. And here's the true test. Let's take a listen to it in the mix. So I'm going to leave the EQ in, and we're going to press play, and then I'm going to bypass the EQs on these guitars. And basically you'll probably hear the guitars blend in a little bit too much, and they lose some of their clarity. You hear that? So this is what we're doing with EQ. We are using just the frequency knob and the gain knob to pinpoint where you want a booster cut, and the Q to adjust how wide you want a booster cut, to basically use it as a smart volume fader. Volume and balance is all you're doing in mixing. So you start with the volume faders and you get the right balance. And then EQ lets you go in and then use volume balance on specific frequencies to give every track the featuring that it needs, finding the sweet spot, and then really a lot of it's removing the stuff that doesn't belong. You clear up space, headroom for the rest of your tracks. You clear out the mud. When you remove stuff, it allows the good stuff that's already in the track to be more audible So all of a sudden you're like, man, that sounds better than I thought it did because there was something masking it. And if you work in those 3 dB to 6 dB chunks of booster cuts, you're pretty much in that nice subtle range where a little goes a long way. And if you apply this principle across all your tracks, you're really going to get more clarity, more control, and all of a sudden you're going to have a mix of really good sounding tracks that now everything sounds contained and in its place, and nothing is distracting. No frequency is piercing your ears. No frequency is covering up anything else. Everything has its place and its part to play, which makes a great sounding mix in the end. So hope that gives you a taste of what EQ in action can look like. Pretty basic stuff here, but this is what makes a great mix. If you can get this right, EQ and then compression like we looked at last week, then you have a leg up on just about everybody else that's scrambling to find the magic mixing trick or plugin or summing box or whatever it is that's going to make their mixes sound great. It really boils down to, do you understand these two tools and can you wield them to perfection? And it just takes practice. It's not nearly as daunting as it looks. The more you practice, a simple EQ is just a smart volume fader. Point it where you want it to go, cut out the bad, boost the good, and your ears will learn and catch up along the way. Hope that helps. Subscribe to the videos if you like them, and join the mailing list as well if you want more free video tutorials and articles and great stuff in your inbox that I'm not going to post anywhere else. And you'll get some of my best material there as well. Have a great week. I'm going to go try to rest up, take some more antibiotics, and get healthy. Talk to you soon.